Hello and welcome back to the Listening Lounge. My name is Nick Day, CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, specialist payroll and HR recruiters. And if you're not familiar with the Listening Lounge and this is the first time you've come across these videos, I want you to take a moment, sit back and relax, because there's so much noise at the moment on LinkedIn. It can be really hard to be heard. Today, I'm joined by Matt Summers, someone I know well. I recorded an HR&D podcast with Matt several months ago. He's a leading voice on training and coaching in the UK. He's the author of two brilliant books, Coaching at Work and Coaching in a Week. He holds an MSc in Human Resources Development. He's a fellow of the CIPD and runs his own coaching skills training company, which is all about providing coaching skills for managers in the world of work. And let's be honest, during this pandemic, coaching in particular has been right at the top of many business agendas. So really excited to have Matt on the Listening Lounge today. How are you feeling, Matt?
I'm feeling good, Nick. Yeah, thanks for having me back.
And so I'm going to kick off with my first question, which it has to relate to COVID, really. Why does coaching make so much sense as a leadership style, both during COVID, but also post-COVID?
So there's a few elements to that, I think. And the first that springs to mind for me is to do with thinking about how much the world has changed and how much expertise, therefore, is now out of date. So if the leader's approach to solving the problems that are manifesting now is to draw on his and her experience and kind of before February 2020, I think they're taking a big risk, trying to solve today's problems with yesterday's solutions. So much has changed that it surely makes more sense to me anyway to lead people to find their own way through this, to find their own solutions, to find unique answers to what are occurring now as unique problems and things. So I think the first answer to that question is the redundancy of experience makes it important now to deal with a novel situation in a novel way with a novel style of leadership, help people find their own answers. So that would definitely be one thing. And then aligned to that, I think, is recognizing that it's really tough, and people are struggling. Despite what we see in LinkedIn about these amazing success stories, I'm somewhat cynical about that. I think people are finding it really tough and people are worried and they're very concerned. And coaching therefore provides a means of checking in with that, of being able to deal with that emotional component of managing a relationship. And I find myself saying to people at the moment, you've got to jump on Zoom or Teams or whatever and have that call, but it's asking about how you're doing, not what are you doing. I think a lot of these sort of leadership calls have turned into exercises in checking up on people. No, it's about sort of checking in with people, if that doesn't sound a bit cheesy, because people are naturally fearful. And of course, the leaders and the managers are as well. I get that. And a coaching approach, I think, perhaps enables some of that to flow both ways as well. So that's good too. And then the third part, I think, is somehow the leadership has got to turn into handing over the responsibility to the other person. And coaching's all about that. One of the key principles of coaching is generating choice and responsibility for on the part of the other person. So it's so important to do that now because we have such limited time to engage with people. And the nature of that engagement has changed when you're trying to do this remotely as opposed to face to face. So I would argue coaching has been the leadership style for decades, or a necessary one, but certainly now absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I personally have had to learn a wealth of new skills very, very quickly, as have most people watching this, this Listening Lounge right now. What would you say to the people listening to this who say, look, we really want to coach our managers. We know we should be, but we haven't got the budget, or where do we find the budget? Where do we find the resource for that?
Well, that's the great kind of paradox, isn't it? There's never been a more important time to develop people and give them new skills and abilities, and giving leaders coaching skills would be high amongst that. And yet at the same time, we've got no resources now to be able to do it. So I think what I would say to people is that the great thing about coaching is the real challenge, or the great thing about adopting a coaching style is that the real challenge is not taking on new things, it's giving up old things. So if a leader or manager really wants to sort of adopt a coaching style or turn into that type of manager, then what they're going to need to do is give some things up, rather than look for and take up some new things. So principle amongst that, as you've said, I think very accurately at the top of this, is to talk less and listen more. I mean, you'll get that from any great coach training. Will teach you and encourage you to do that, but you can start now. Replace talking with listening. Replace giving directions with asking questions. Questions that are not designed to sort of diagnose a problem, but questions that are designed to get the other person thinking and taking notice of what's happening to them, because coaching ultimately is about helping people learn from their own experience. So if we take a more questioning style to working with them, they're going to have their awareness raised and get more juice from experiences, from things that are happening to them. And then finally, I suppose, or the third component of this would be to replace control with trust. So rather than micromanaging, which is never really a good idea, but is almost impossible now post-COVID when we're so far apart from each other, we've got to sort of, I guess, start playing out trust a little bit more. I mean, ultimately, the only way you can find out whether you can trust people is to trust them. So,
you mentioned right at the start of this that, the Zoom MS Teams piece, if you like, is the most popular technologies. We tend to say, what are you doing rather than how are you doing it? And I think obviously at the start of lockdown, there were some trust elements with everyone working from home. Are they doing the job? Are they doing it when they're working from home? We don't know. And I think we started to soften a little bit on that. But from a coaching expert as you are, what advice would you give to managers who are coaching teams remotely? What have we learned and what can we continue to develop?
Well, it is different that I found as a way that coaching needs to adapt, because I'm probably spending less time with people. To try and make the sessions a little bit more impactful. I find myself putting much more emphasis now on kind of agreeing actions and having some metrics or some measures that people can follow between conversations, where not so much of the work now is being able to done within the conversation, if that makes sense.
Fantastic. So last question, while I've got you here, Matt, because you are a real expert and we've spoken on this subject so many times before as well. If I was a leader watching this and I want to come away from this, listening to this listening lounge and say, you know what, I want to be a better coach, what advice would you give to them as a first step to becoming a better coach?
Be more willing to go with the flow. So that's going to embrace the three things that I spoke about earlier on, the questioning and the listening and the increasing trust. But it's maybe going slightly further than that, I suppose, in just being prepared to go where the conversation goes.
Sure.
That might take us into some uncomfortable places, because there is a lot of fear in the atmosphere at the moment, and you might find as a manager that adopts the coaching approach that people are starting to give you some stuff that's maybe a little bit personal, perhaps a little bit uncomfortable to listen to. But it's probably very healthy that it's coming out, because in my experience, people don't share the more personal content unless they're comfortable that you're a person they can trust with what they're saying to you, and then being able to sort of vocalize that, I think, is very, very healthy right now, at a time when people's mental health is obviously at the top of the agenda. Now, you get to hear something quite alarming. We've still got to be prepared to recognize that, sometimes people need some external help. But generally speaking, a coaching style conversation that enables people to just say, look, this is how I'm feeling and it's really uncomfortable for me. And you just be prepared to maybe just to listen to that, not necessarily feel that you've got to intervene or fix things up or solve a problem, just allowing people to express what they're experiencing, how it's making them feel. You might find is almost sort of part of the cure itself. So my encouragement would be to anyone that wants to just sort of nudge that a little bit further along, is just be prepared to go without the aid of a safety net sometimes.
Perfect. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having your listening lounge today with Matt Summers. I know we have in the past, and we could again talk about this subject for hours. I will give you a little plug though, because it's a brilliant book, and when people want to learn more about coaching, do check out Coaching in a Week. I know you can access it on Amazon and other sources. It's a brilliant book all about the subject. Remember, if you're listening to this, of course, every good conversation starts with good listening. Thanks again, Matt, and I will join you all again with the next episode of Listening Lounge real soon. Take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you.